As an administrator, we should be aware of the many protocols that are used in networking and a brief understanding on how they are used in certain applications. Some protocols such as HTTP and FTP use ports, and these can be thought of virtual connections to and from a host. These ports have numbers, so it is important when setting up a connection to a specified service that the correct port numbers are used. Demonstrating the difference between these protocols and ports can be difficult. In this task, it is done by setting up a web server. Web servers are computers on the internet that host websites, serving web content on request. This is referred to as hosting. To update the web pages on a web server, the files need to be uploaded to it. One way of doing this is using the File Transfer Protocol, or FTP. To demonstrate the importance of port numbers and the associated protocols, we shall be using the Apache Web Server. It enables a host on a network to act as a web server, so other hosts are able to access the websites it holds. The task requires two computers or virtual machines, one to act as the web server and the other as a client or host on a network. The Apache Web Server is open source software, which means it is free for anyone to use. Because of this, Apache is the most common web server package used on the internet. XAMPP includes Apache Web Server along with other items that help create dynamic websites such as HPH or Hypertext Preprocessor, a scripting language, a MySQL server which hosts database to act as the back end of a dynamic website. The skills to use this technology fit the job description of a web developer rather than a network administrator, and are beyond the scope of this course. However, a quick practical overview of these technologies is beneficial as it helps the installation of our web server. Another feature of XAMPP that is of interest is the FileZilla FTP server, which allows us to upload our web pages from another host. The first item on the agenda is to download and install XAMPP, so the nominated host will need connecting to the internet. In our example, we have chosen Windows 7 to be the web server. Before running the web server, check that it has internet access. Select a respective machine, then click on Settings. Click on Network and check Enable Network Adapter has been selected. Attached to is NAT and an advanced cable connected has been enabled. Click on OK, then start the machine. The XAMPP package is not compatible with all versions of Internet Explorer, so for this task use Chrome. If not already installed, open your browser and type in Chrome. Navigate to google.co.uk Chrome and follow the on-screen prompts. When completed, start Chrome, then type in the browser www.apachefriends.org. Select XAMPP for Windows. Once again, follow the on-screen prompts. Click on Downloads and then on the file XAMPP Win2 Installer docs.exe. When prompted with the user account control, click on Yes. Once again, follow the on-screen prompts. Close the browser. In most cases, XAMPP will automatically run, so close the application and shut the computer down, as we now need to configure the web server for internal network, assign a static IP address and enable sharing. In Virtualbox, highlight the web server, click on Settings, Network and check and change to Enable Network Adapter, attached to Internal Network, Advanced Cable selected. Click on OK, then start the machine. Once started, right-click on the network adapter found on the taskbar, then open the Network Sharing Center. Click on the adapter settings. Then right-click on the Local Area Connections, then Properties. Double-click on the IPv4, then select Use the following IP address. In our example, we have chosen 192.168.1.2. Click on the back button and you should have returned to the Network and Sharing Center. Click on Change Advanced Sharing Settings, then turn on Network Discovery. Turn on File and Printer Sharing. Turn on sharing so anyone with network access can read and write files in the public folder. Save changes, then close all windows. To test Apache, click on Start, All Programs, XAMPP, then XAMPP Control Panel. Currently all modules should have stopped and actions should display Start. Click on Chrome to start the browser. As we have changed the virtual network connection, we shall not be able to access the internet at this time, so as expected, Chrome will report this site can't be reached. We can access the web pages using the HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So in the address bar, we type in HTTP 127.0.0.1. Remember, this is the loopback address that always refers to this host. Once again, the same message will reappear because we have not yet started Apache. Close the browser and from the XAMPP control panel, click on Start button allocated next to Apache. If prompted, do you want to keep blocking this program? Click on Allow Access. When we reopen the browser and type in the loopback address, we should be greeted with the XAMPP welcome screen. We can also use localhost, which should have returned to the same screen. This is because the operating system uses a special file that allows the name localhost to resolve to 127.0.0.1. In other words, we can use the name localhost instead of entering the loopback IP address. The browser knows to direct any HTTP request through TCP port 80. The word port can conjure up thoughts of physical connections such as the USB port or mouse port, but these refer to virtual ports, and there are a whole list of them. These were introduced in the early years when computers started to reach the ability of doing many things all at the same time. The best example of this is emails. When we send emails, it transfers it through port 25. When we receive emails, they arrive through port 110. So every microsecond these ports are examined by the CPU, and if it finds something, it is transferred to the respective device that relates to that port. We could think of these ports as pigeonholes. You might question why are they not given fixed physical addresses within the operating system. The simple answer is not all operating systems are the same, even when they are produced by the same manufacturer. But we can standardize on them if we say send something to pigeonhole number 25, as it will not matter where it is located, just as long as it's labeled as pigeonhole number 25. When a website is in development, we may want to hide it from the outside world, making it available only to those who have an input in the site development. One way of doing this is to instruct the web server to use a different port for the HTTP requests. To change the TCP port of the web server, minimize the browser and the XAMPP control panel. Open my computer, double-click on C, assuming the operating system is installed there, double-click on the folder XAMPP, double-click on the Apache folder. Whether we are using Apache on a Windows host or a Linux host, the configuration process is similar. Apache uses a series of configuration files that must be manually edited using a text editor such as Notepad. If we double-click on the folder CONF, we should find a file called httpd. This is one of the Apache's main configuration files. To edit it, we can right-click on the file and select Open. Select the program from a list, then click OK. Select Notepad. Scroll down until you find the line, listen 80. It is this line that tells Apache to listen for HTTP requests on port 80. We can change this to the value of 8080, save the file and minimize it. stop the Apache service, then click on Start to restart. Restart the browser and click on Reload this page. We should receive "This site can't be reached." This is because the HTTP request is being sent to port 80. Yet we have configured the Apache to listen on port 8080. We can use the address bar to redirect the HTTP request to port 8080 by typing in localhost 8080. The web page should now reappear. Restart Notepad and change the listen value back to 80. Save the file, close it, restart Apache control panel, then stop the service. Restart Apache and test the web page is accessible again using HTTP localhost. At present we're seeing the default page created by XAMPP to act as a welcome page. We'll now replace this with our own. HTML, hypertext markup language, is a code that the browser interprets to create the web pages we see. It is not the aim of this course to teach HTML or any other aspect of web development, as this is a completely separate subject from networking. However, we shall now take a quick look at HTML, PHP and MySQL, as there are three technologies that are very common and awareness is helpful. To create a new Apache welcome page, we close the browser and navigate to XAMPP htdocs. The folder tells Apache where the web pages are stored. We can change this value by editing the configuration file, but by default it is this folder in which we should create our websites. In this directory you will find an item of interest described as a PHP file called index. Most web servers are set up by default to point to a page known as either index or default to use as a home page for that directory. To be able to manipulate these files we shall need access to their extensions. As default, these are hidden. So we can select Organize, then Folder and Search options. Select View tab. Remove the tick from the Hide extensions for known file types. You should now be able to see the file extensions. We shall rename the file index.php to oldindex.php. We now return to the browser and try to access localhost. We should find the web page has disappeared and left simply with a list of files and folders. Returning to the htdocs directory and right-clicking within the window, we can select New, then Text Document. This will display the name of the new file as New Text Document and the file extension will be txt. Delete the name and extension, then type in index.html. The name of the new file is index and the extension is HTML. Press Enter. When prompted with "Are you sure you want to change it?" click on Yes. You will see that straight away the file is now represented by the Internet browser icon. We'll now add some content to the page. So right-clicking on this file and from Open With, select Notepad or choose Default Program. Notepad is not available. Click on the selector to the right of Other Programs. Select Notepad, then click on OK. Since this is a new file, it will be blank. As this is not a web design course, the following code is at the most basic without any really explanation. This code is intended to be used as an example and would not meet web standards. Before coding in HTML, you should look for more accurate information from a dedicated HTML tutorial. So in the notepad, we type the following code. It now needs saving and we shall minimize Notepad. Returning to the browser and access HTTP localhost. You should find a web page called Welcome to my web page with the message Hello World is now being displayed. HTML can point the browser to pictures, create forms and many other types of web-based content. However, the problem with HTML alone is that it is static and can only display the information it is instructed to. For example, if we required our website to display the date, we would need to update it at midnight every night, otherwise the date would be incorrect. HTML has no way of knowing the date or time as it cannot directly communicate with the server. PHP is one of the many server-side scripting languages available that can be used to communicate with the server in order to display dynamic content. The eventual output is still HTML, but PHP pre-processes this to suit requirements. By adding the following to our file, it will also display the day of the week. Note that the character used in the inverted comma is a lowercase l. Now saving the file as index.php and close Notepad. Remember to change the Save As type to all files and change the file extension to PHP before saving. Open the browser and access localhost. You will see that beneath Hello World, the day of the week. From this you can see how PHP provides a mechanism that is used by the server to decide on what is required, then processes the HTML accordingly. MySQL is technology based on SQL, Structured Query Language, which is used to create databases. If such a database exists, server-side languages like PHP can be used to add or extract information from the specified database to customize the HTML output even further. This is how websites can have membership systems, retain customers' details and display all manner of interactive content. Until now we have created a website on the web server and displayed it on that host only. Now we need this website to be available to all hosts on the network, ideally from the same IP address. We can gain access to the website using the host IP address. We can also access the server by the computer name. So if we open the properties of the computer, we can see in our example it is Janet PC. However, if we were communicating over a WAN, this naming system would not work. We cover naming systems in depth later in the course, but for now we shall use a very basic and old-fashioned method of name resolution by resolving the IP address. On the host, right-click on Notepad, then click on Run as Administrator, then click on Yes when the User Account control appears. This is necessary because the file that is required to be edited requires administrative rights. On File, choose Open. At this point, we are required to open a file called Host, and this is in a folder called etc. So navigate to this file by C, Windows, System32, Drivers, etc. Change the files of type to All Files, then double-click on the file called Hosts. Hosts is a file that contains details of the IP addresses and the names to which they should be resolved. This method is not really used anymore due to the millions of addresses that will need to be resolved on the internet. However, we will use it in this case just to make accessing the website easier. Notice the first entry is 127.0.0.1 localhost. It is because of this entry that we could use the name localhost rather than having to use the loopback address. Therefore, to resolve the IP address of the host, we need to add a further entry. In our example, we wish to include an IP address that we used and the new name. So we shall use 192.168.1.2 Web Server. You should replace the IP address with the IP address of your host. Save and exit the file. In the Chrome browser address bar, type in HTTP Web Server. The name should resolve and the website should be accessible. As the host file is a local file, the web page is only accessible by the name from this host. Further hosts need to access this website using the same URL. We would need to edit the host file of each or find a better solution, covered later in the course. As we are working with just two hosts side by side in a LAN, updating our website is easy. We can either physically edit the files on the web server, or we can even share the htdocs folder that stores our files, allowing other network users to edit the files. However, in reality, the website could be based on a server on the other side of the world. A developer may constantly use many different computers in different locations, so we need a way that authenticated users can remotely access the files from the computer in any location. The most common way of doing this is by using FTP, File Transfer Protocol. FTP allows us to download a copy of the file from the server, edit it locally, then upload it to the web server using the FTP account. Now the FTP server software will require starting. Restart the XAMPP control panel. Click on Start to the right of FileZilla. This may cause the firewall to display a message. Click on Allow Access. Click on Admin to the right of FileZilla. The server address is 127.0.0.1. Connecting to port 14147 will be displayed. This is just used for the admin and is not the port to which our clients will connect. In a real-world situation, we would also secure the admin facility with a password. However, in this case, simply click on OK. Now we shall check that the FTP server is listening to the correct port 21. From Edit, select Settings. Here we find in General Settings that port 21 is listed, the standard port for FTP connections. If we were security conscious, we would change the port, but if we did, then each host would need to be aware of the new port number so that they could connect. You will leave the port number as 21. Click on OK to continue. Now we need to create an account for the web designer, and in this example we will have a username called Uploader. Now we shall add an FTP user account. From Edit, select Users. To add a new user, click on Add. For username, enter Uploader, then click OK. Tick Password and enter Let Me In as a password for the user. The user then needs to be assigned a folder to access. As we are going to make the user the web designer for our main website, we'll give them access to the correct folder to edit the files. So in Shared Folders, you will see that no folders are listed. We click on Add and navigate to C, XAMPP, htdocs, then click OK. As this account is for our web developer, we will give them full access to this folder by placing a tick in Write, delete and append under Files, then create and delete under Directories. It is important to note that these permissions apply to this folder only, so the user does not have access to any other part of the file system. We have now set up a user that can upload, download and delete content, along with create and remove directories from the website home directory htdocs. Before continuing, look at the web server, FileZilla server window and notice that a series of messages that have appeared, starting with the date, time and who is logged on. We will now access the web server using the FTP from another host. And there are various ways of doing this. Often a web developer will use a third-party FTP client software such as Qt FTP or Smart FTP, which is a client version of FileZilla, or even an FTP facility provided by a web design package such as Adobe Dreamweaver. These offer a GUI, graphical user interface, that is used to transfer the files we need. If such a program is not accessible, we can access the server using tools that are integrated into most operating systems, such as the command prompt or a Windows Explorer type GUI. First, we'll configure a second host. In our example, we will be using Windows 8, so we shall minimize the host that we have been using as our web server. With our guest highlighted, click on Settings, then Network. Check that Enable Network Adapter has been selected, Attached to is set to Intel Network, and in advance, Cable Connected has been enabled. Set the host with a static IP address so it will be able to communicate through the network with the web server. In our example, we have set it to 192.168.1.3. Check using the ping command that the new host can see the web server. So at the command prompt, we type in ping 129.168.1.2. We can access the server using the command prompt if we first type in cd desktop to enter the folder that relates to the desktop of the user that is currently logged on. Microsoft Windows comes complete with a command line based FTP client, simply known as FTP. So if we type in FTP and press enter, we should now be at the FTP prompt. Here we can use certain commands to access the remote server or the web server. FTP commands will almost certainly be more or less the same whichever CLI based client you use. To check the commands here, we can type in help. Although there are quite a few commands here, remembering the function of just a small number of them will enable us to perform quite a few tasks. Before continuing, you should do the following before returning to the command prompts. If we open the browser on the web server and access the main website using HTTP Web Server. Although we have accessed the FTP client, we have yet to connect to the server. We can do this either using the IP address of the server or a resolved host name. The command prompt to open connection is open. So on the host we can type in open 192.168.1.2. FileZilla will now prompt you for your username. Use uploader and press enter. And enter the password. This should have caused a message to appear, 230 logged on. Although the prompt has not changed, we are now logged into the specified home directory of the user, C XAMPP htdocs. View the contents of this directory using the dir command. If a message appears, connection closed by remote host, then you will need to log back in. You should recognize some of the file names such as old index. If we now type in dir*.php, it will list all the files with that extension. We know from earlier that our home page is named index.php. To edit this page from this computer, we first need to download the file from the web server, and the command to do this is get. So we enter get index.php. Since we are at the desktop folder, anything we get from the server will be copied to the desktop as we can see here. To edit the web page, start Notepad, then from File click on Open, Desktop, then change Desktop Documents to All Files. Double click on index.php to open the file. We shall now change the text. Once again, save the file and exit. Remember, we've only edited the local copy, so now we need it transferring back to the server. So the FTP prompt, we can use put index.php. After receiving the message transfer OK, we can refresh the browser on the web server, and we should find that the home page title has been updated. As we've demonstrated the basics of FTP with the CLI, we'll now move on. However, you may want to look further at the FTP commands, as they can be useful when the command line is all we have to work with. We can also access the FTP server using Windows Explorer. Click on the File Explorer found on the taskbar. Right-click within the address bar, then select Edit Address. Press backspace to delete any entry, then type in http 192.168.1.2. So with the HTTP, we are reading the web page. Notice here the difference in the URL from what we use to browse the website. To make a HTTP connection, we use the syntax HTTP. Close the window to return to this computer window. Once again, right-click within the address bar and change this to FTP 192.168.1.2. Now we are using the File Transfer Protocol. When prompted, enter a username of uploader and the relevant password. You will now see the files within our user home directory as if they were stored locally. To edit the index.php file, we should right-click and copy the index.php file to the desktop. Double-click on the file to open it and add some further text. Save and exit. Copy the index.php file from the desktop to the web servers window. When prompted with Confirm File Replaced, click on Yes. Return to the web server, start Chrome, and enter into the browser HTTP localhost. Although frequently used, FTP does have a critical security flaw that you should be aware of. The username and password details are sent out in plain text, meaning that if someone set out to capture the packets being sent and received, the account details could be compromised with relative ease.